وين في بوبي؟ Good morning. You are watching a special broadcast hosted and produced by LAU students from the course Journalism 419, Media Law and Ethics. We are broadcasting live from LAU Beirut Campus on YouTube. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Noha Shaban and I am a communications major.
And my name is Talin Wehbe, and I'm also a communication student. Our media ethics problem is biased reporting on the Lebanese-Israeli war. In Lebanon, this matters deeply because media outlets do not work in isolation from the society and politics around them. As Dajani explains, the structure and content of Lebanese media are shaped by existing social and political forces, and those affect how media messages reach people and influence public consciousness and also behavior. And in other words, the news in Lebanon does more than tell people what happened. It can shape how they understand the conflict, who they blame, and how they respond to the actual war that is happening.
Which makes bias in relaying news during the war an ethical problem, since bias, especially in the form of politically influenced agendas, can lead to incitement of violence and conflict. Through reporting on certain groups as threats, misunderstanding of the war through nationalism, causing journalists to misinform the public, and when each media outlet narrates according to their affiliations, this fills the public sphere with obstruction. Bibles also exist in newsrooms. Newsrooms use style books as Bibles to provide necessary direction for journalists to maintain accuracy, professionalism, and uniformity across various topics. Society for Professional Journalists uses four standard core professional codes of ethics, which are acting independently, minimizing harm, accountability, transparency, and seeking the truth and reporting on it. In Lebanese context, especially during wartime, honesty, fairness, integrity, accuracy, critical thinking, and neutrality are the main codes of ethics. Journalists must remain independent through witnessing and conveying without reporting without subjectivity. It is important to note that during the war, ethical reporting needs to adhere to humanistic values, such as avoiding incitement, in which journalists are ethically supposed to refrain from using offensive expressions, hate speech, or any form of language that incites fear, conflict, and tension among the public. During the recent horrific war Lebanon was enduring, news bias was prevalent in reporting. For example, while the New York Times was reporting on Israeli invasions in South Lebanon, the platform used light and dismissive wording, clearly portraying its bias towards Israel, with the important mention of how Lebanese media outlets are either owned by or affiliated with certain political parties or sects. Another violation of ethics and bias through affiliation in Lebanon is MTV's reporting on the ceasefire occurrences, in which MTV referred to as an alleged victory, while showing an edited video clip of citizen Vox Pops and a speech of the Secretary General of Hezbollah, al-Sheikh Naim Qassem, in a mockery manner, claiming that while the Secretary General of Hezbollah celebrates victories, people are hurt, dead, injured, in addition to mass destruction. This indicates MTV's news reporting bias, in which the outlet did not report independently, lacked objectivity, and did not abide to humanistic values. MTV also avoided the codes of ethics through its reporting on the celebratory acts that took place when the ceasefire was announced in Dahya. Although it is their job to report on what is happening, but in an ethical and professional manner, MTV reported on the armor shots that were fired in celebration of the ceasefire, referring to the actors as animals, to be precise, Baha'im. MTV also mentioned how these celebratory actions were causing damage and fear. MTV violated several codes of ethics in this piece of news, through ignoring humanistic values, inciting fear and conflict, usage of offensive language, hate speech, and lacking integrity. The bias clearly present could potentially generate tension, hatred, and deepen divides among the public. We will now be sharing with you a segment.
In your opinion, why is neutrality important during reporting, specifically in the war?
As a multimedia journalism student, we are taught that we have to try to be as neutral as possible, especially when reporting, especially during the war, to avoid any problems. But unfortunately, in Lebanon, many media outlets such as MTV, Al Jadid, and much more, they they base their reporting on their narratives, so they basically influence the public opinion.
في الصحافة عنا بلبنان ما عندهم موضوعية، مع انه لازم يكون في قانون بيجبرهم يلتزموا بالموضوعية عشان ما يصير مثل ام تي في كيف بتحرض على الاسلام بلبنان.
خصوصا نحن عندنا بعلبك ما في موضوعيه بالاعلام، بحس انه ما في صحافه تحكي بالمجازر اللي عم تصير وعم ترتكب بحق اهلنا فوق.
انا بيرسونلي بحس انه لازم يكون في نيوتراليتي، لانه اذا مثلا انه انا عم بحضر هيدا الصحافي وحسيت انه هو مايل لشيء معين يعني وعم بيأرجي ايموشنز توردز شيء، انا اذا كنت بفكر غيره ما حكون بدي كفي احضره، فكرمال هيك.
كيف الصحافة بيلعب دور بتغيير الآراء خلال هيدي الحرب أو بالإعلام خلال هيدي الحرب؟
أول شيء هن بيخافوا ينقلوا الخبر الصحيح، بيخافوا من الإسرائيلي ومن الأمريكاني، بيخافوا يقولوا الخبر المضبوط شو هو، بيقولوا عن الشهداء عنا قتلى وما بيقولوا عن الإسرائيل عدو، بالعكس بيقولوا دولة إسرائيل بيعترفوا فيها، وهولي ناس لا بيعرفوا الله، بيقتلوا الولد والمرأة والمدرسة والناس هي وماشي بالطريق بيقتلوهم وبيعترفوا فيهم. عشان هيك ما بينقلوا الخبر صح، عشان هيك ما بنتأثر بالصحافة ولا من نقريه ولا من عبره، لأنه بخاف، منه مؤمن بالله، بخاف من الإسرائيلي ما يقتله، وهو مش عارف إنه عمره وعائلته وأهله وسنيته كلها بيد الله، الله اللي بيقرر أمتى بيموت وأمتى بيعيش. بس هيك.
مرحبا.
أهلا.
شو اسمك؟
علي الشقار.
علي، من وين أنت؟
أنا من جبال لبنان، من الصوان.
أوكي. طيب وإلك قد إيه بالمدرسة هون؟
تقريبا صار لنا هلا شهر وشوي، وأول ما بلشت الحرب.
أوكي. ومرتاح؟
هلا من ناحية الرياحة أكيد ما في حدا مرتاح هون هلا بهالوقت، وضع إنه ما كثير مثلا منيح وهيك، في إنك بتقلي كل العالم إنه متضايقة وفي إنه فايت ببعضها وهيك، عرفتي كيف؟ إنه العالم مش مرتاحة هون.
أوكي، عندي سؤال لك بخص الإعلام وبخص الصحافة. شو هو الصحافي المثالي بنظرك؟ كيف لازم يكون؟
الصحافي المثالي لازم يكون من نظر انه يؤدي واجبه، يبين انه الحقيقه كامله، يكون مثلا يصور المواقع اللي عم يصير فيها مثلا القصص اللي عم تصير، ويكون شجاع، يكون مثلا انه ما يخاف شيء، يكون انه يفرجي قوته للعالم، انه يفرجين انه هو قد المهمه اللي بيقوم فيها.
انت اي قنوات بالعاده بتحضر؟
الجديد، الام تي في، ال بي اس، ال بي سي.
اوكي. وليش بتنقي هول القنوات بالضبط؟ يعني شو الشيء اللي بيميزهم عن غيرهم؟
لانه هن بدي اقول لك دغري بيطلعوا الخبر.
مرحبا.
اهلين حبيبتي.
كيفي؟
الحمد لله.
فيك تعرفينا عن حالك اكثر؟
سلمى. سوري، يعني انه انا اول مره بطلع على الكاميرا وما بحب احكي على التي في وهيك، بس انه مضطرين لانه الظروف هلا عم تحكمنا. انا بشتغل بلجنه طوارئ للحرب وهلا عم نشوف كتير ناس ومهجرين وناس جايه وناس رايحه، يعني الحرب بتعرفي قديش
فهمت عليك. هلا انا عندي سؤال لك، انه كيف بتحس الاعلام عم يلعب دور حاليا خلال هيدي الحرب؟
اكيد في كتير تحيز بالاخبار، لانه كل واحد بيحكي شكل وكل واحد بيطلع بيحط بيتحيز لحزبه لمحطته لهيدا، يعني الأخبار كتير عم توصل كتير واسعة ومتضخمة، ويعني أنا بفضل ما حدا يسمع هالأخبار إلا من ناس يعني واثقين منهم.
فيك تعطينا شي مثل طلع قدامك أو أنت اشتغلتي مع هذا الموضوع معين؟
مثلا إذاعة الجديد كانت تطلع وتقول لحد إسا بعد ما ضربوا، صاروا 48 ساعة ما ضربوا، عم بذكروا الإسرائيليين تضربونا. محطة الام تي في بتطلع بتقول الجيش الإسرائيلي. كيف جيش إسرائيلي؟ هو هذا جيش احتلال، كيف يعني؟ عيب نقولها هذه الكلمة. تاني شغلة ما بيحترموا، ما بيقولوا شهداء، بيقولوا قتلى، يعني قتلى شهداء عم يموتوا بالوطن على الأرض، هن عم بيدافعوا عن وطننا، يعني عيب بيقولوا هذه الكلمة. احترام للشهداء، لأهاليهم، لوطننا، احترام للبنان. ما لازم نقول انه قتلى، بنقول شهداء. يعني هذا التحيز الطائفي والتحيز الحزبي والتحيز السياسي، فعمل شلخ 100، عمل شلخ سياسي و100 إذاعة فيه و100 متطرف فيه بهذا البلد. فالواحد بده يتسمع للناس موثوقة منهم.
فيك تعطينا مثل كيف لازم القناة الموثوقة فيها تكون، أو كيف لازم يكون الصحافي الموثوق فيه يكون؟ شو هو الصحافي المثالي بنظرك، أو القناة المثالية بنظرك؟
أنا القناة المثالية بالنظري أول شيء بدها تكون وطنية، لأنها هي بتنتمي للوطن. تاني شغلة بدها تكون إنه في عندهم ثقة إنه هيدا الخبر موثوق منه صحيح، مش كاذب، مش أخبار كاذبة. وثالث شغلة إنه يكونوا هن على قد المسؤولية، لما بيطلعوا لحتى يذيعوا يكونوا قد المسؤولية، قد الخبر، يكون في عندهم ثقافة إعلامية. هاي الثقافة الإعلامية بتوصل الخبر.
أوكي، شكرا كتير إليك
حبيبتي، شكرا
وأخذنا
لك
من وقتك.
For our original code of ethics, we focused on 5 clear standards for war reporting: accuracy, dignity, context, fairness, and accountability. First, accuracy. Accuracy means using controlled and precise language. A journalist should not exaggerate, soften, or distort the reality of war. Instead of using words that create fear or anger, the journalist should clearly state what happened, who was affected, and what is confirmed. Second, dignity. Dignity means that people and communities should never be described in a mocking or dehumanizing way. In war reporting, this means avoiding insults, stereotypes, or words that can make people seem less human, even when reporting on harmful actions. Third, context. Context means that no clip, quote, or headline should stand alone. A journalist should explain what happened before and around the event so that the audiences understands the full situation. For example, if a report shows people celebrating during a ceasefire, it should also explain the war context, the losses, and why different groups may react differently. Fourth, fairness. Fairness means not treating one group's suffering as more serious or more deserving of attention than others. A journalist should include different affected voices and avoid framing one group only as victims or only as threats. As the photo Bill of Rights states, you are dealing with marginalized persons, not a faceless number and a vanishing minority. Marginalized section, this was also mentioned in that section. Finally, accountability. Accountability means that if my own wording, editing, or framing starts to reproduce the same bias I am criticizing, then I have to revise it. This means checking the script, visuals, and edits to make sure that they don't create mockery, fear, or hatred. I wrote the code in this way since style books also provide a form of ethical guidance on language, as Belankir once said. Along with representation, signifies social existence, as Steiner says also. Now, the above original code was applied by choosing careful wording and avoiding sensational framing. That follows a quote which is more equitable and accurate representations. Journalists have a duty to tell the truth and minimize the harm, as Ward 2021 mentioned. I applied accuracy by explaining the purpose of the report to every participant before recording. I made sure they understood that the segment would be broadcasted on all social media platforms related to LAU Communication Club. I also asked the same question in the Vox Pops so the answers would be collected in a fair and consistent way. I applied dignity by creating a respectful place for participants, especially because the topic was sensitive. I interviewed 2 displaced people, one from AUB and one from Jnoub, and a hijabi that was a crisis manager. I did not pressure them to answer in a certain way, and I allowed them to speak about their experiences without turning their pain into a dramatic scene. I applied context by explaining the background of the report before each interview. I did not want the audiences to hear emotional answers without understanding why they mattered. The interviews were connected to the wider issue of biased war reporting, displacement, and the way media framing can shape public opinion. I applied fairness by not pushing participants towards specific answers and by not putting or cutting parts only because they did not answer the question directly. I also respected consent when one Vox Pop participant did not want his face shown but allowed his voice to be used. Finally, I applied accountability by reviewing my own segment to make sure it did not repeat the same bias I was criticizing. I avoided sensational wording, mocking edits, and unfair framing. Since our project criticizes biased reporting, my segment also had to follow the ethical standards that we created. The goal was not only to talk about responsible journalism, but to practice it in the way that the segment was produced as well. Thank you for watching our broadcast. We hope our segment highlighted the bias prevalent in our news during wartime as Lebanese citizens and how we should choose channels and reporters accurately. Thank you.
Thank you.
كنا نراسل بالوما ونقول شرح يطول ولما اجتمعنا الحال نسينا شو بدنا نقول كنا نراسل بالوما ونقول شرح يطول ولما اجتمعنا الحال نسينا شو بدنا نقول لشو الحال علينا خلي النظر للنظر يشرح هواه ويشتكي لشو الحكي.
Good morning. You are watching a special broadcast hosted and produced by LAU students from the course Journalism by Media Law and Ethics. My name is Jan Fattouh and I'm majoring in communications.
And I am Sarah Jabir, and I'm also majoring in communications. Deepfakes and AI generated news have become a real media ethics issue because they make it much easier to create something that looks or sounds real even when it is fake, edited, or fully made by AI. So, if fake visuals, copied voices, or AI written news content are used without being labeled clearly, people can be fooled not only by the material itself, but also by the fact that it is presented like proper journalism. This is why the issue is ethical and not just technical, because once synthetic media starts creating doubt and making people less sure about what is real, trust in news gets weaker too. So, if AI made material is entering journalism, then journalists need clear guidance on how to present it honestly so that people can judge it fairly.
An example of this problem occurred in 2023, where news spread online about an explosion near the Pentagon, but it was an AI generated image. AP News reported that Arlington police and fire officials said the image was not real and that no incident happened at the Pentagon. This example fits the problem because the image looked real and breaking news evidence, even though it was fabricated, and it spread fast enough to briefly affect the stock market. A second example happened before the 2024 New Hampshire primary when AP News reported that voters were told not to vote in the Democratic primary using AI voice imitating President Joe Biden. This example fits the copied voice problem because the fake audio used a familiar political voice to create false authority and mislead people in real news and election context.
Many current newsroom AI guidelines are already functioning. For instance, oversight is one of the guidelines that Reuters, The Guardian, and CBC follow, where no journalism piece aided by AI can be published without human involvement, oversight, or permission. Others stress on the importance of AI detecting and tracking tools as an ethical way to limit plagiarism and enhance the public trust in the media. However, we can see varying guidelines among the media. For example, some guidelines, such as that of VG, say that AI generated content must be labeled clearly, while others, like Wired, insist that no piece should be released lacking direct human contribution and approval. This is why there should be one uniform code of ethics for AI use in journalism that journalists and media producers should follow. To dive deeper into the topic, we interviewed an AI model and AI testing specialist. Doctor?
Now for the video. Okay, so the first question I want to ask you is how has deepfake technology changed over the years? and made fake news more scalable and convincing. With regards to deepfakes, it has now become much easier to do it. It's been around for forever, but now it's way easier to do anything because before you had to actually stitch a face on someone else's body, or like that kind of deepfake. You needed like to use actual tools, more manual tools. Nowadays, you can just ask, an AI bot or whatever, hey, do this for me, and now it will work. And because of how easy it is to go around and replicate this over and over and over with different things, you can very easily make fake anything. And we've seen it very recently in terms of, everything that people post on the internet in terms of news or, breaking news, this happened. Nowadays, you need to really check if it actually did happen. In what manners are deepfakes utilized to manipulate or fabricate news content, such as breaking news, interviews, or political speeches, among others? Okay, so the first thing is to manipulate photos to show specific things. Let's say there's someone that's holding something, and then you can change what's written on the paper. Or someone can say something, but it's actually me saying it, and you do someone else's face on me. Yeah. And someone else's voice as well. The voice faking is also very strong nowadays. As long as you have a recording of someone's original voice, you could fake it later on with AI. Another thing is it's mostly fabricated evidence of things or fabricated items and objects. For example, oh, there's this weapon that was found, or like, oh, this guy said this, and then there's a recording of him saying it, but he never actually did say it. That's the most common ones I've seen. Other ones include like let's say footage of something that's completely made up. So not only are we altering things, we are also making them up. Yeah, and it's much easier now. Before, you needed the budget of Hollywood to make something convincing. Now, you go and you ask, Hada, you pay what, $20 for Mr. Whoever? Please make this for me. Make it long, make it this, make it that. Okay. 10 minutes later, you have a video. Not even 10 minutes, 5 minutes later, you have a video. What are the consequences of it in terms of the spread of misinformation and public perception? In terms of information, it's become much easier to trick others or misinform other people. You can start churning out videos on videos of things that aren't real and sending it everywhere. And you know how people are with, let's say, Facebook or WhatsApp, where they send things to other people and it spreads. And everyone has that one aunt or uncle that sends them weird stuff. It goes like that, and it's much easier to trick people. Not only is it easier to spread misinformation and people are being tricked, but those who have been tricked before are now more wary of these things. So now everyone's saying, yeah, this is AI, it's not real, even if it's real. So not only is it, there's one effect where things that are AI are tricking people into thinking it's real, but now the opposite effect has happened, that real things are now being said that, oh, this is AI, to discredit them. So if someone says something that you don't like or that someone else doesn't like, that person will go and say, no, this is AI. It's not true. And what are the existing limits of deepfake detection tools? And how effective are tactics such as AI-based verification tools? How accurate are they? Okay, so I'm not sure about detection tools, how they work, but I have reason to believe that AI detection tools aren't very accurate. I've seen many a times where, especially for writing, there are these AI detectors, for essays in universities and stuff, where someone could write something and then it'll tell you, yeah, it's 90% AI. Well, that's not true. It just depends on your style. And I think with videos or photos, like deepfakes, it is, I think in terms of like video generation, because the way that videos or photos are generated by AI, the fact that they're intrinsically different than real videos, where real videos or real photos will have metadata behind them. Like these fake AI videos don't have the actual data. So you can, if you change like some settings, I've seen people do it online on Twitter, for example, or X now. Yes. That if you change the colors around, make it full gray, you can see, or like check the frequency map of everything, you can see it. But that's just a matter of time before deep faking it can even do that, So for now, I think that using AI tools to check for AI generated content for now isn't that strong, because it's like an arms race. When the deepfake detection catches up, the Yes. deepfakes get better.
And this keeps going on and on and on and on.
How effective are existing legal frameworks in reconciling the misuse of deepfakes or AI when it comes to fake news? And who do you think should be accountable for it?
Okay, so this depends country to country, but usually there would be, because we're talking about news specifically, this goes to government mainly, or police, depending on the kind of news. If there is a Ministry of Information, some countries have that, some countries don't, especially when you talk about free speech and things like that. If they have free speech in their law, then even though technically it's not real, but
Exactly.
okay, there's fake news that will come out, and if the government likes it and it's AI generated, is it okay to still have it, especially if it's faking something? So it also depends on them. But in an idealized reality, let's say that yes, AI generated content that is verified to be false should be removed or should not be allowed by the government, by the Ministry of Information. It depends who controls these things in each country as well. It falls on the jurisdiction of lawmakers.
To wrap up, deepfakes used to be produced using complex manual tools, but now with AI, they are way easier to create and spread. Images, voices, and videos can be entirely fabricated with AI, making it harder to distinguish truth from fiction. This can also cause people to dismiss real events, thinking that they are fake AI products. And with deepfakes and AI improving faster than laws and detectors, verifying before believing has never been more important. Thus, codes for AI use in news media should be formed to set specific and uniform guidelines for journalists to avoid audience deception and manipulation.
Verifying before believing has never been more important. Thus, codes for AI use in news media should be formed to set
Our original code of ethics for AI generated news and deepfakes would be based on 5 main rules: verification, human responsibility, transparency, and limits on realistic synthetic media. Firstly, we mentioned verification at the beginning for its importance to prove that an audio, photo, or video is real and is not AI generated. It is very necessary just in case to take this order to not be misled, just in case the content is AI generated or deepfakes. Second, human responsibility means there's always someone who's in control of AI. Since AI is a tool that causes errors and that may cause errors or give fake news, it is important that the data given by AI is checked by a human editor. Third, transparency is a must when AI generated news or deepfakes are being used for news content. If a journalist or reporter shares information that is AI generated and there wasn't honesty on where the facts came from, that will most probably cause uncertainty to people and they won't know what is real or not. Lastly, we mentioned limits on realistic synthetic media because it is a priority to choose protecting the truth. AI generated news and deepfakes have gone too far most of the time, and it has been used to create false content or even harm others. It is crucial to set limits and in order to not cause confusion or deceive the audience. Overall, the code is based on one simple idea: AI in journalism is not automatically wrong, but it becomes unethical when it hides the process, weakens the truth, removes human responsibility, or makes deception more likely.
As we have discussed, there are no consistent codes for AI use across media producers, and due to exposure to deepfakes created by AI, people have become uncertain of what they see. This is why we believe that a uniform code of ethics for AI use in journalism should be used. We have applied our original code in producing our segment. Before production, human responsibility was applied by only using AI to brainstorm and create guidelines for interview questions. However, the questions were revised by us and tailored in a way to maximize benefit and understanding. During production, we verified that no AI materials were used throughout the segment until the conclusion, where AI images were clearly sourced and labeled to ensure transparency and only used to illustrate our topic, limiting realistic synthetic media. Thank you all for watching.
Thank you.
نسم علينا الهوى من مفرع الوادي يا هوى دخل الهوى خدني على بلادي نسم علينا الهوى من مفرع الوادي يا هوى دخل الهوى خدني على بلادي يا هوى يا هوى ياللي طاير بالهوى في منثورة منثورة ابن العند يا هوى يا هوى ياللي طاير بالهوى في منثورة.
Hello, you are watching a special broadcast hosted and produced by LAU students for the course JSC 419 Media Law and Ethics. We are broadcasting live from LAU Beirut Campus on YouTube. My name is Lolita and I'm majoring in communications. With the constant use of social media, platforms begin to capitalize on our time, data, and attention. Your activity is used as a commodity where it is sold between platforms and other companies for targeted ads. To keep this going, platforms need our attention. This is where influencers come into play. Influencers, also known as popular users, are a part of producing the media that the public consumes. They retain the mass user attentions that platforms look for. In return, the more engagement creators get, the more they get monetized. This creates a negative reinforcement where influencers often unknowingly spread false information in their content. This is misinformation. If they know this content is false and continue to promote it, this becomes disinformation. This violates ethical grounds of media production. They are being deceptive and inventing dialogue while also lacking in accuracy and verification, as per Word's guidelines. This concern is worse in countries where digital media regulations are scarce, such as Lebanon. So we must revise current ethical guidelines of influencers. As an example, an unnamed Dutch influencer who promoted paid sponsorships as organic content was fined €6,000. In Lebanon as well, a misinformation issue is hidden ads where sponsored content is not properly disclosed. This violates another ethical standard of media production which pertains to independence and allegiances, because promotional posts may indicate a conflict of interest. We can link it to food-reviewed influencer Joy Tasidis, who had an obvious but unclearly disclosed collaboration with Deek Duke in its new rebrand campaign.
It's supposed to be a taste test بس انه عم بنزل فيهم.
As you can see, there is a clear promotional relationship between this influencer and Deek Duke, and that was not ethically disclosed to the public, making it a form of incredible information. Now, we will delve into Vox Pop interviews to see university students' knowledge and opinions on the issue of influencer misinformation.
Reporting live from the Lebanese American University of Beirut, today we will be conducting interviews with some students who are constantly exposed to social media. We will be asking them their thoughts on misinformation, on what people post, and specifically influencers. Let's get right into it. Do you think influencers should be held accountable for spreading misinformation, or do you think it's the audience's job to fact check it?
I personally think both should be doing their job. So, for example, influencers should know what they're spreading, and in case it is a misinformation, they should own up to it and apologize. But at the same time, I personally think that the audience should not just believe anything that they're fed, and also do their own homework, if you will, and study on their own the information to double check it before believing anything they see on the internet.
How much do you trust influencers as sources of information, and why?
Honestly, I don't really trust them because they're being sponsored by the company or by anyone who's telling them to do the ad. I personally prefer that I do the testing to just see if they're accurate and if they can be trusted in the future.
Do you feel like you come across misinformation on social media often? And if you do, can you give me an example?
So I think that I do come across misinformation all the time, especially during the ongoing war that's been happening in the country. And I think it's something that's very dangerous because we don't get to know, we don't get to understand what's actually true and what's not. For example, what happened during at the beginning of the first war that was happening, there was a picture taken that overlooked the airport, and there was a plane going above a bomb, and later on it turned out to be misinformation. So I think that it gives the wrong story and the wrong idea, and I think it's something that should be stopped because at the end of the day, it's all propaganda in a type of way, and it affects the whole community, the whole population, and what they think of a certain, let's say, situation or a certain group of people or everything like that.
In your opinion, how dangerous can misinformation from influencers be to the average person?
Okay, so I think this field is a huge field that should be taken into consideration. For example, some influencers can be promoting some health products where anyone that sees their promotion can take these products and can ruin their life. So it should be taken into more consideration, and it should be taken serious, or else the one promoting these products should be held accountable.
We used the ethical code of conduct for social media influencers and content creators, which was implemented as a part of the Influencers Against Disinfo work by the Aspen Institute of Germany. This code is an aid for influencers and helps them fight any misinformation while promoting responsible, trustworthy, and clear content. We also used a very recently published study by Kankova and Matas in 2026, which basically examines deeply what the impact of influencers in spreading misinformation is and what the audience reactions are to it. Thanks to these sources, we were able to find up to 5 key principles that directly align with the topic we are tackling today. Principle one is responsibility and accountability. This states that influencers should always differentiate between factual information and their opinion when making any sort of statement and label any misleading or AI content to not share hurtful information with their viewers. Principle two is trustworthiness and integrity. This states that influencers should always clarify whether they are getting paid or are somehow biased towards a product, and should always let people know how to educate themselves on whatever it is they're selling, whether it's a product, it's an opinion, or it's information. Principle three is factuality and expertise. What this states is that influencers should never use wording that gets them views and engagement over any factual words. It should always be accurate over any type of engagement. Principle four is information quality and media literacy. What this principle encourages is for influencers to always make sure of the information they are spreading, whether that is through fact checks or source checks, and should primarily advertise critical thinking before anything else. So, this code is supported by the academic study we used, which highlighted that encouraging critical thinking can reduce trust in and engage with social media misinformation. Influencers should always encourage their audiences to think critically, since they are factors in shaping what people think, what people see, and what people believe. And last but not least, principle five, which is respect. Influencers should always make sure to engage with people in a respectful manner, regardless of their beliefs, opinions, or lifestyles.
All right, moving on to the original code. The original code will be the Cedar Code. We covered 3 main principles. Principle 1, the radical source of transparency. Before sharing any news, political claim, or health information, Lebanese influencer must publicly disclose the origin of their source, especially during crisis, where war, elections, economic collapse. This can be done by stating the source out loud or in the caption. Moving on to principle 2, paid content disclosure and independence wall. Influencers who are famous among Lebanese population must never allow brand partnership, political sponsorship, or party affiliation to contaminate their news sharing behavior. Any content that intersects with paid
paid partnership or political interest must be explicitly labeled, and the influencer must maintain a strict editorial independence wall between sponsored and factual reporting. A clear paid label means all partnership, sponsorship, and advocacy should carry paid partnerships. Moving on to principle 3, proactive audience media literacy. Influencers who are famous among the Lebanese population have a duty to build their audience's media literacy. An influencer with 20K followers who never teaches their audience how to spot misinformation is complicit in their audience's vulnerability. This principle requires influencers to use their platforms to regularly model critical information habits and explain how to verify sources and to show how misinformation travels, especially in Lebanon's complex ecosystem. Influencers will be issued a fine of $1K by the Lebanese Ministry of Information if they violate any of the essentials principle in the code. With great powers comes responsibility. Now we're gonna move on and watch our interview with our influencer Pamela Eid.
My name is Leah Al-Fata. I'm gonna be hosting today's interview with influencer Pamela Eid.
I'm Pamela Eid. I'm 20 years old and I'm majoring in communications in LAU. I have approximately 12K to 11K, so 11,000 followers on TikTok. Well, I definitely think that it's the influencer's job, anyone who has a platform and is posting content on it for the audience to see, they have to double check and fact check whatever they are posting, since people sometimes are not media literate. It is also definitely the audience's job to do so. So I cannot just consume content without double checking and fact checking that. So it is both people's responsibility, but as an influencer, your responsibility is bigger and you are held accountable for that since you have a big platform with a great audience. So I think this is an interesting question because people honestly tend to directly film content and post them without waiting to get the backup. And this is the media. The media, you have to be fast. You have to be fast to be ahead of other people to get more views when you post. So this is why many influencers do that. But honestly, personally, I do not hop on any trend unless it was something more fun. I would never hop on a trend or talk about something specific where both people's point of views, let's say, are explained, or if I do not have information about the topic fully. So I would never talk on something that I do not fully know about, since I would not want to have that backlash from people when things get misunderstood or miscommunicated. So I honestly prefer always to know both sides, to know all the information before hopping in on any trend. Honestly, this is something interesting to talk about since misinformation is something real. For example, if we're talking about fitness content, influencers who often talk about subjects that they do not know about a lot, like the dietitians, and they start spreading false information, people start having eating disorders because of them, they start having bad habits due to that. So I definitely agree that the enforcement should be present. However, I do not think that the consequence should be great, such as jail time, because in some countries having misinformation often leads to them getting imprisoned or their account being banned, etc. What I would think is every video that should be posted, people from TikTok have to review it and fact check it before allowing it to be posted or not, or in case it was reported, yes, consequences have to be served. Maybe just a simple ban or sending them as a message as a warning, and then things could escalate. But definitely consequences should be present since it is affecting the audience in real life. So yes, honestly and personally, I think these are two different things. But people and influencers online are mixing them. When someone reaches out to me, gives me a good deal, and pays me money to talk about my deal, even though I do not agree and think that this specific product is not good, will I still promote it? So this is a question I always ask myself, and this is what influencers often do. They still promote it even though it is something that is being lied about. Sometimes it is not true information that I am spreading. So here it's very dangerous. We have to double think, and here I draw the line. If I have a promotion that's amazing, that's great, but do I want to spread information that is false to other people? I have to be wise about that, since people will start using this product that I'm promoting, and the backlash will come back to me and to the product. So definitely, if an influencer gets a promotion, that's amazing. Review it beforehand, double check and fact check before you spread misinformation, and definitely don't spread misinformation if you are getting paid. Sometimes it is better to reject the money that you are getting paid if it means rejecting spreading misinformation. So it is a dilemma that influencers have, but it is a clear journey that one has to take. Why would I choose misinformation over money? That you are getting paid if it means rejecting spreading misinformation. So it is a dilemma that.
All right. So the application of the code was shown throughout our broadcast. We started with the first principle, radical source of transparency. Today we are in wartime. Any misinformation can cause many problems and misunderstanding. So we made sure that our sources and examples are not biased or biased towards any political party. For the second principle, paid content disclosure and the independence wall. We made sure not to pay any of the influencers or the interviewees in the interview or in the vox pops. And for the last principle, proactive audience media literacy, we applied it by using an influencer interview as an example of ethical practice of our principles. Also, we checked each information source and checked how credible they are before using it.
In today's world, it's easier to believe what our eyes see rather than seek the truth. Do not be like that. Stand against misinformation. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. We were still on.
غربي هالغربي ما تعرف بلادي خدني على بلادي شو بنا يا حبيبي شو بنا كنا طلعنا وفارقنا شو بنا شو بنا يا حبيبي شو بنا كنا طلعنا وفارقنا شو بنا بعد الشمس بتبكي عالباب وما تحكي يحكي هوا بلادي خدني خدني على بلادي علينا الهوى من نفر الوادي يا هوى دخل الهوى خدني على بلادي راجعين يا هوا راجعين يا زهرة المساكين راجعين يا هوا على دار الهوى على نار الهوى راجعين
راجعين يا هوا راجعين زهرة المساكين راجعين يا هوا على دار الهوى على نار.
You are watching a special broadcast hosted and produced by LAU students from the course Journalism 419 Media Law and Ethics. We are broadcasting from LAU Beirut Campus on YouTube. My name is Salim, and I am majoring in communication.
My name is Lara, and I'm also majoring in communications.
And my name is Cynthia, and I'm also a communication major student.
Today, we're going to be discussing how artificial intelligence has created this ability to have images of war, which look real but were never really taken. So, is it really ethical for media outlets to use these AI-generated images while covering war? You know, we're going to see how the images are used, why they're risky, and what the media should do in this case.
So, as the war intensifies, so does the number of people witnessing reality through media outlets, pushing people to rush for accurate, verified information and visuals. Yet they are met with realistic and emotional AI generated images without proper disclosure. In turn, it blurs the line between truth and lies in people's already stressed out minds. These issues become serious risks that can mislead the public, fuel propaganda, and manipulate public opinion. This leads to an overall loss of transparency, accountability, and credibility in journalism, especially visual journalism, despite its much needed accurate and authentic visual representation. So, the problem is no longer limited to just random accounts. The use of AI generated images by many media outlets skyrocketed with the Iran war. It forced multiple fact checking organizations to be tasked with discrediting the fake destruction and casualties portrayed daily. In a single week, an image of a captured US soldier was circulated along with images of fake strikes on the Riyadh embassy and the US airbase, spread only to be debunked by AFP consistently. These images show how misinformation is spread like wildfire through deceptive AI images. So it's important to be transparent visual journalists to make sure not to cause panic and harm like the examples did.
The Society of Professional Journalists and the National Press Photographers Association, they both provided us with relevant codes when it comes to being ethical journalists. You know, it's important to take responsibility, to be accurate, to verify information, to give context, minimize harm, and be accountable and transparent. If an image is made by AI, the audience should be aware before getting misled. You know, editing should keep the integrity of the content and the context behind the image. Moreover, it's also crucial for us to make sense of what's happening around the world. You know, whether it's consciously or unconsciously. And for our original code, it's basically when media outlets cover war. You know, it's AI images. They should not be used as like proof of events that happened, that occurred. They may only be presented when showing a general situation and obviously not for emotional trauma or clicks for profit. A lot of bad impact can happen from these deceiving images, and it's crucial to label them as AI generated images and verbally mention it. You know, studies showed that like many students have struggled lately to tell the difference between what's realistic and what's AI. And so us, you know, we won't make up these fake scenes of homes getting destroyed, nor ones of victims suffering. So audiences, they won't be deceived. Before using any image, there are questions to be asked. Is it verified? Is it labeled correctly? Could it mislead viewers who are touched by war? And if the answer is yes to all of these questions, then we won't use them in our production.
And now for our application of codes. Our code of ethics is simple but strict, and we broke it down into a few main principles that guided everything we did. First, clarity and truthfulness. Everything we present has to be clear, accurate, and not misleading, especially in visual journalism. There's a strong responsibility to show reality as it is, since visuals can easily be misinterpreted or manipulated. Second, transparency in visuals and production. We made sure all images, clips, and sources are clearly labeled so the audience always understands the context. As Newton explains, it's important to be transparent, visual journalists, and open about how content is created. Third, context and non manipulation. We don't take anything out of context or edit in a way that changes the meaning. What we show reflects our original message without exaggeration. Fourth, accuracy and verification. Any information we include is checked and based on facts, not assumptions or trends. Fifth, respectful representation. We present people and situations in a fair and respectful way, avoiding harmful stereotypes or biased framing. Six, transparency and accountability, especially with AI. If any AI tools are used, we make that clear to the audience so they understand how the content was produced. And finally, fairness and avoiding bias. We stay aware of bias in both data and storytelling. And we actively work to avoid reinforcing stereotypes or unfair perspectives. And now for our segment.
To delve deeper into the topic, we interviewed an expert in the field, Nathalie Samaha Martin, an AI governance consultant.
My role is to help organizations understand, manage, and take responsibility for how they use AI. So this means advising them on ethical frameworks, risk management, how to draft guidelines, and also conducting AI literacy or AI strategy workshops. It's possible, but you need very strict governance. To have a good code of ethics, a clear code of ethics must require, first of all, transparency, which means labeling of AI content, human oversight, and alignment with principles such as the Society of Professional Journalists. It is possible, but you need to be very strict about how you implement it. With using AI-generated images in the context of war, especially, is misinformation, loss of credibility, legal exposure, manipulation of public opinion, and because we're talking about the context of war, you have other things. You have also the risk of amplifying propaganda. You have the risk of re-traumatizing the people with these new and very real and lifelike images. Ethical stance should be to prohibit this, because authenticity is the core of journalism. So when you are using fabricated or AI-generated images, you are not being authentic. So prohibition should be the default attitude. Look, it's a very fast-growing technology, as we are seeing. Progress is happening, updates. It's very fast, and laws are taking time to keep up with it. But eventually, it will be properly regulated. There are risks involved, and the risks actually now we are seeing that they are becoming more and more serious with AI agents, with the autonomy that they have, certain behaviors that we are hearing about that they are showing. So we need to be even more vigilant.
But we didn't want just the expert's view. In reality, we need to know the audience's reception to these images. So we asked LAU students their views on the ethics of using AI-generated images on war coverage.
أكيد I trust the media less because we are in a worse situation. People are already stressed, already nervous, already people are frequently checking the news, bombing, etc. It's not the time to publish or post fake news or AI generated content, videos. It's not ethical at all.
صراحة I would trust the media less because AI shouldn't be used in such situations لأن war is already يعني عم تلعب بعقل الناس enough, so we don't need this. It would make me feel like I can't trust the media إنه إذا فيهم to misspread هيك شيء. ال AI generated picture بتكون إنه بتخلي العالم إنه ما بقى تصدق إنه عن جد هيك عم بيصير حتى إنه مش بس بلبنان كمان برا. I think I would definitely start to look more into the sources behind the images, and I would definitely start being more cautious and double checking.
I really think that we want to do something to change this.
So, basically, the issue we focused on is how the media can be misleading, whether it's through unclear visuals, missing context, or not being fully honest. That's what can confuse people and break trust. In our segment, we tried to avoid that by sticking to our code of ethics. We made sure everything was clear, labeled, and not taken out of context. We also kept our information accurate and presented everything in a very respectful way. At the end, our goal was just to be honest and transparent with the audience. All of these principles come back to one main idea we learned from Newton. To being transparent and honest, especially with visuals, is what builds trust with the audience and keeps media very ethical. Thank you guys for watching our broadcast. We hope our code of ethics was useful for future purposes.
منودع زمان من روح لزمان ينسانا على أرض النسيان منودع زمان من روح لزمان ينسانا على أرض النسيان منقول رايحين منكون راجعين على دار الحب ومش عارفين منقول رايحين منكون راجعين على دار الحب ومش عارفين راجعين يا هوا على دار الهوى على نار الهوى راجعين
راجعين يا هوا راجعين يا سمرة المساكين راجعين يا هوا على دار الهوى على نار.
Hello, you're watching a special broadcast hosted and produced by LAU students from the course Journalism 419, Media Law and Ethics. We are broadcasting live from LAU Beirut Campus on YouTube.
My name is Nada Salam.
And my name is Petra Bighanem.
And we are majoring in multimedia journalism. Orientalist framing in international media has emerged as an important ethical issue because it affects how regions are conceptualized. This is especially the case for the Middle East, where media discourses are often fail to represent the complexity of reality. Prominent examples of these harsh framings consist of the Western representation of Iraqi and Afghan women. The mainstream media frequently reports on the region in terms of conflict, extremism, and general instability.
Orientalist theories introduced by Edward Said describe how the East is constructed in terms of inferiority to the West. The East is generally viewed as lacking rationality, as being profoundly different from the West. Moreover, Orientalism took on a particular ugly hue after 9/11, manifested in discussions of terrorism, in which the figure of the terrorist has become indistinguishable from the Oriental, or even simply vague and general. The result has been a sweeping brushstroke applied to entire regions and people, characterized by perceptions of fear, suspicion, and threat, rather than by any nuanced understanding of context or diversity.
This issue is ethical rather than simply one of representation. The production of media images does not simply reflect reality, but rather journalists create images of reality through their decisions about what images to publish, which people to quote, and how to package the news. Those decisions, repeated over time, create a pattern or formula for coverage of this field. Media ethics is concerned with how the media is used to shape public understanding and to promote a more informed and just society. In this broadcast, we interviewed LAU students alongside Rida Marji Faqih, a media professional, and showed prominent examples of Orientalism in Western media.
Orientalism is often highlighted in terms of how entire regions and cultures are framed in particular ways. Media and public discourse often define the region primarily in terms of terrorism and extremism, contributing to a simplified and generalized understanding of the country. This discourse of terrorism became increasingly associated with a broader and vague Oriental identity, where violence is not treated as context specific, but rather linked to an essential understanding of Islam. This reflects a form of dehumanizing Orientalist framing, where entire populations are associated with violence and reduced to a general identity of threat. As a result, violence is frequently attributed not only to specific groups, but extended to the wider population, reinforcing a perception of Afghanistan as unstable and dangerous. Through dominant media discourses, the country therefore often portrayed the global audiences as a site of conflict or lost war.
Another important example of Orientalism in the media coverage of the war in Afghanistan is the Saving the Woman narrative, where the Western military presence in Afghanistan was often portrayed as a mission to liberate the Afghani woman from the Taliban. And this just represents a sexist form of Orientalist framing, the sexist stereotype, where women are depicted as passive victims without agency, reinforcing the idea that they require external intervention in order to be liberated. Another example is the way in which war is visually represented in the media, where they tend to rely on familiar imagery of the East, and such representation fixes in the minds of the audience, but with a very limited and inaccurate understanding of the conflicts that are happening. The Orientalist framing is also at work in political comment and media reports on Palestine. Orientalist media in the past framed the Palestinians as irrational and less than the Israelis, and this framing has also been applied in political narratives as well in the international media coverage. Palestinians in Western media are more often than not automatically associated with Hamas and the Palestinian cause as terrorism.
Act civilized, act kind, because this is the problem with what's happening in the region.
رمضان بومونو إبراهيم مربحت محمد المصطفى.
Have you ever questioned whether media coverage of the region is biased or incomplete?
I mean, yes, definitely, because each news channel is supported by a political party. As an example, MTV always يعني below on the Muslims, and everything they do, they relate it to Hezbollah, even though it's not related.
Do you think international media represents the Middle East accurately? Why or why not?
I think that they glorify and romanticize the culture, but it's not the people. I think they represent people as terrorists, as people who are dangerous or unwanted. I feel like they normalize the terrorist jokes like, "Ooh, you have a bomb with you," especially for people who wear veils or white abayas and yeah.
So nowadays, what I mostly see is basically the influence portrayal of our Arabic culture. And in which sense do I mean this? I mean this in the sense that they portray us Middle Easterns as people that are limited, whether it's related to our culture, to our religions. They either they classify us all as a certain religion, or it's even related to gender roles. It can be portrayed that men should go to work, etc., and women have this standard of living, and that they just make us limited. And even it even reflects on our way of thinking. They think that just because we're Middle Eastern, we're very limited in our way of thinking, and that we are not capable of doing and being everything it takes to actually be a successful person in 2026, which is not the case. However, they portray us as these Arabs that are very limited and terrorists, basically.
Like the majority, مش majority يعني, بس إنه a large percentage of them still think we live in deserts and on camels. Like they, in their minds, يعني بعدنا نحنا we're not on their level. Like in holy Arabs, they still live on camels in the deserts, in the pyramids. Like they have no knowledge of how culturally advanced and how developed we are. We're not that developed يعني, بس
How important do you think it is, how important language is in reporting on conflict, and especially when the words terrorism or militancy are being used?
How important? Words are very important when you are reporting. Words are extremely important. We need to be very careful with it. When I was being interviewed for the incident on April 8th, I kept on repeating the same words over and over. And my words were Israelis are barbarians, the Israelis are non-humans, Beirut is a non-war zone, etc., because I wanted this message to be conveyed elsewhere. I wanted the message to be conveyed to the international community. So definitely, the words that you use play a very large role. But then if you notice, every few years, they come up with new terminologies that we start normalizing and we start using always. Okay, so let's say, for example, a word that we've been using recently, for example, what is a word that we've come up, a new word that all of a sudden we've started using? The Levant, for example. The Levant is a word that was not used before, and then they started using it. The MENA region. The MENA region is a new word that was used not very long time ago, and then we started using it in this part of the world. Another word, for example, that we started using, let me see, politically, if I'm talking about it politically, gender, which is in Arabic jandara, okay? This word did not exist a few years back. And I'm بحكي, for example, 20 years ago. This word did not exist. And then all of a sudden in the United Nations, they started using this word and it became spread and all of us started using it. So every now and then they come up with a new word and then all of us started using it and then it becomes normal for us. And then they define it and then it becomes one of those words that all of us start using it to understand what we're talking about, and becomes one of those words, it's part of our everyday lives to use it. So definitely, terminology is very important.
Yeah. Je commence. Existing frameworks that address ethics in journalism emphasize accuracy, fairness, and responsible representation. Journalists should seek truth and report it, and minimize harm. Orientalism framing is very relevant because repeated stereotypes about the Middle East, and more specifically prominent ongoing conflicts like Palestine, undermine both accuracy and fairness by presenting incomplete and distorted representation of reality. In addition, the public interest approach discussed in the course argues that media should support democratic participation by including a wide range of voices and viewpoints. When applied to Orientalist framing, this suggests that ethical journalism should incorporate local and regional perspectives rather than relying primarily on external and Western viewpoints. However, while these frameworks provide important ethical guidelines, they are often too general to effectively address systemic framing patterns, such as Orientalism. This reveals a key gap in existing ethical frameworks in which they don't sufficiently address how representation can become structurally biased. As a result, there is a need for more specific ethical guidelines. Our proposed code of ethics is called the Contextual Representation Principle. This code is based on 5 main rules. First, contextualization. Reporters and editors need to include an understanding of history and politics in their reports. This is especially important when covering conflict. Adding brief background explanation within the reports, consulting credible historical sources, and including expert analysis. Second, inclusion of local voices. Reports could benefit from input from people living in the region rather than only relying on comments from outsiders. Conducting interviews with local residents, journalists, and experts, citing local media sources, and prioritizing first-hand accounts.
For example, Rida, the woman that we interviewed, her daughter went viral on social media because her and her father were walking near the Corniche where an airstrike happened right in front of them. Another concept of the code that we want to apply is visual responsibility, where media producers must avoid repetitive and stereotypical imagery that reinforce narrow narratives, particularly in war coverage. Diversifying visuals to include everyday life, social environments, and non-violent contexts. Fourth, we need to implement language accuracy, where journalists are urged not to resort to emotive terms and generic use of the T word, which is terrorism, and instead use accurate and relevant terminology to describe acts of political terrorism. Identifying actors, describing actions factually, and avoiding labels that conflate groups with entire populations. Fifth, narrative accountability, where media professionals need to challenge prevailing narratives that portray counter-security practices and counter-insurgency contexts in developing regions through more nuanced representations, highlighting overlooked contexts and critically examining commonly used frames. This code can be applied through our segment in several different ways. First, through visual representation, where we avoided relying on only conflict-based imagery, and we included visuals from movies and Arab cultures to reflect a more balanced portrayal of how media discourses portray the region, respectively. Second, we made a conscious effort to include local perspectives through interviews with LAU students and media experts, which helped us include viewpoints within the regional context. Third, in terms of the language used, we avoided generalized terms such as violent or terrorism as a blanket label. Fourth, we tried to include context in our reporting by explaining the history and or politics behind the events as they occurred, as providing the examples and how we could apply Orientalism to them. And we presented certain media coverages by briefly explaining how the discourse used became generalized and how this influenced media framing of the region. And finally, we constructed an ethical review of the visuals and the script of the video for our segment through an ethical lens in order to ensure that the production did not replicate any of the same Orientalist misrepresentation of the Middle East and South Asian Asian region of the world. And moving on.
Orientalist framing is not simply a matter of representation, but a matter of ethics. When media repeatedly relies on dehumanizing and sexist stereotypes, it does not just inform audiences. It shapes how entire regions are people are understood. Ethical journalism therefore requires not only accuracy, but a conscious effort to challenge these patterns and represent reality more fairly. Thank you.
Thank you.
that means it's over. Go
مبروك
ahead,
يا
Sama.
هوا يا
Anybody want to finish the course?
هوا يا حبيبي يا ورد
Salim, you want to finish the class?
نحن العاشقين على
Thank you,
طول
Sabah.
العاشقين
You think you did. Wait until you see your final grade. Sama, I need you to stand.
عاشقين عاشقين من طوب
Okay, if you can't see the camera, we can't see you.
عايشين
Salim, you're gonna have to get in with the crew. Tighter.
على نار الهوى على نار الهوى
You ready? Salim, you're gonna have to get in with the crew. Dr. Farah!
يا زهرة المساكين
راجعين يا هوا على دار الهوى
Yeah, I had that all on
على
here.
نار الهوى
Can you hit mute? Okay. So, quick question for the class. You remember the first day of class? What did we do?
We did the CMI sheet.
We did a reading note taking sheet, sure. But what else did we do the first day of class?
Define media ethics and media law.
Media ethics and media law.
And then we checked each other's definitions.
Exactly. It's this year. Yeah. We checked we all read each other's definitions. So now here we are 15 weeks later. Can each of you tell me how you modified over the semester, like where you are now with this concept of media law, media ethics? What did you think the first day? What do you think now from what you remember, right?
So
So just very quickly go around. Nobody repeat each other. Add to each other's idea. You can say you agree, but add something, okay? Lolita.
So mostly before, I only knew that media law is legal, about legal stuff, and media ethics is more about morals and values. But now I know a more nuanced approach where I know specific guidelines in media ethics that I should follow as a communicator and a media major. So now I know the specific guidelines of how to be ethical in media, and I know the exact difference between media law and media ethics. Thank you.
All right. I agree with Lolita. And the difference between media law and media ethics is really wide. We thought just it was laws and ethics difference between a country and another. We thought everything was the same. So this course helped us to define and acknowledge more what is media law and what's media ethics.
So before, I used to think that media law and ethics were only for journalists and media producers to know how to produce media for the intended audience to avoid deception and so on. But now I also I learned that media law and ethics is also for governments, how they govern media policies and how they treat journalists as well fairly and ethically.
I learned that not everything legal is ethical. You know, like let's say, so sorry for the example, but let's say that there's this person who died, right, and he's getting documented. That does that make it ethical? Is that what he would have? Is that like what he would have wanted? Is that what his families would have wanted? So I think ethics plays a very, very big role.
I learned the difference as well between media law and media ethics, but I also found it very interesting that we delved deep and we found out that throughout history, there is an essence through history to what we are today and what we use today. That's it.
So I found out that media law is basically discourse written on a piece of paper, and it's perhaps very old, and it might not be aligned with the ethics that we have. And I found out that ethics, they differ, as mentioned before, and they are also personal. Like it depends on the journalist, on the reporter, on the media outlet.
What I learned from this course is that ethics is a very long process, And even if you're not a journalist or a writer or a reporter, you still use it in everyday lives. And we, as communication students and as university students in general, we need to know these stuff to manage being ethical online, on Instagram, on social media in general. And it is a very serious thing to like actually give everyone credit and to be fair to everyone.
I found that there's a big difference between like ethics and what's legal, but I also found that not everything that's legal is ethical, and not everything that's like not everything we think is perhaps legal should be done. So this was something huge, and I also agree with what my friends said. I mean, we had a huge misconception of what legalities are in this world and what ethics are in this world. So yeah.
I learned that I needed to think deeper. So I see these posts and I see these medias, and I've never thought deeper about the idea that transparency is more than just a word to throw around that say I did that, or accountability. Instead, we each have our own way of applying it, and we need to apply it in more than just the media we see on TV, because it's in our everyday life. And to think deeper about each thing we see, because everything we see has something behind it, has a code of ethics behind it that we need to be aware of.
From what I've learned is that we have to evaluate everything that we see online, because we have to understand the ethics behind it, and if it's trying to harm someone, and it's good to understand what we're actually reading, because everyone has a different opinion, and there's a lot of spread of misinformation, and this is why I think that it's good to evaluate, especially media law.
So everybody went, correct? Yes? Oh, you didn't go? I'm so sorry. So answer the question. And I have one last question for everybody. One question for the group. Go ahead. So it's from what you thought about media ethics first day of class to where you are now.
So I think that by the end of the course, I realized the importance basically of media law and ethics, and how, as mentioned before, it had more of an importance for all of us and for journalists and even for communication students, and not only for, like, for example, people working in the media. So it's not just guidelines to follow, it's actually basically a way to keep us ethical and treat everyone fairly.
Going into the course as a journalism student, I know that media law and ethics were very important, but after finishing the course, I realized that the level that I thought it was important, it exceeded by like 10 times more than that. And I believe that media ethics are very, very important to follow as journalists, but this course made me realize how sometimes they can be undermined, and they can be passive when we're focusing on regions that are not specifically targeted in the Western media. And I believe that this course made me realize how much of a problem that is and how it needs to be fixed urgently.
Yeah. So thank you for the course reflection. One quick question about this assignment. We see many students going to class today to do a final exam. We see many students stressed out on campus studying for finals tomorrow. So would you have replaced this assessment with a final? Would you prefer a final exam?
No.
Never, because we wouldn't learn anything.
This was the best.
Hands-on
Like
experience?
Sarah
Anything
said,
else?
anything that is hands-on experience will be more beneficial for us than something.
And
Okay, I have to go run the board, so keep going.
And now I have a question for all the watchers. Is it ethical if it's legal? That's a question that we should all know now.
Hello.
And okay, I have to go run the board. And now I have a question for all the watchers. Is it ethical if it's legal?
That's a question that we should all know now.
البلبل نجوى حبه يا حبيبي كلما هب الهوى وشد البلبل نجوى حبه لفني الوجد وأضناني الهوى كفراش ليس يدري يا حبيبي كلما هب الهوى وشد البلبل نجوى حبه لفني الوجد وأضناني الهوى كفراش ليس يدري سهل قلبي يا حبيبي حلما من سنة فرحي وغدري البلد لمني من وحشة العمر كما لمت النسمة عطر النرجسي حبيبي كلما هب الهوى وشد البلبل نجوى حبه لفني الوجد وأضناني الهوى كفراش ليس يدري سر قلبي يا حبيبي حلما من سنة الصبح وبدر الغلس لمني من وحشة العمر كما لمت النسمة